Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bree. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to keep this short. Now, Bree, it's one of those classics. We are online friends on Twitter, and we've never actually met in person or actually met face to face. So this is a first for me as well. So I'm excited about this. Here's my little bio for Bree, which I just took off her website. Bree is a digital marketing analyst, strategist, and educator, helping businesses around the world increase their ROI using data-driven strategy. Bree also has a merchandise store, which is fantastic. There's no merchant placement in this video, but anyway, so Bree is going to help us get started with GA4. And if you do have questions, by all means, wherever the chat is for you, please leave the questions in the chat and we will ask them. I think, Bree, it's going to be later on, it's going to be a little bit interactive. So
absolutely.
I will be quiet. I'll put myself on mute and pass myself over to you, Bree. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that awesome intro with absolutely no product placement, which is great. Yeah, so I'm Brie E Anderson. If we've never met before, it's great to meet you. If you just Google Brie, as in like the cheese, E Anderson, you'll find all of my stuff. I hang out on Twitter mostly, so I do see a couple familiar faces on here, so that's awesome. Yeah, today we're gonna be talking about Google Analytics 4, something that most people hate. But they also hated universal analytics. So I do have a little faith that people will come around eventually. So yeah, let's get to it. As a business, you probably have a reason for being in business. You don't just work the long hours for fun and just as something to do. You probably have a goal, right? I like to think of marketing as a race, right? So you do all this preparation, and then one day you set it free and you say, go do your thing. But so like a race in the sense that you want to have an end point, because if you don't, you're just going to be running forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever with, no reason to stop. That's why you need a finish line, right? So when it comes to marketing campaigns, you want to have an idea of what your goals are, what, that quote finish line is, whatever that might be for you. Essentially, you want to start with the end in mind. You want to have the goals of the marketing campaign as clear as possible before you jump into the marketing campaign. This is the same thing for business. You want to have the idea of what you want, from your business as clear as possible before you jump into your business. You wouldn't go into business without knowing what's going to be my margins here. How much money do I need to make? How much money do I want to make? How am I going to make this money, right? You have to have the end in mind in order to be successful. In marketing or just in business in general, these objectives kind of can be really anything. It's all dependent on where you are in your business, what kind of campaigns you're running, etc. These are three of the ones that I see the most common. So purchases, if you're doing e-commerce, whether that's physical products or digital products, your objectives might be purchases. Phone calls for people that are local, or maybe you have like sales calls or something of that nature because you have a high ticket item. So that might be something you track. And then form fills. So maybe you're just trying to generate leads to fill your pipeline so that you could, for me, this is what I'm tracking. I try and get people to fill out a form so that I can determine whether or not they're going to be a good fit for my business. And then whether or not we should continue to have a conversation. So you want to have a good idea of all these objectives. So at the end of your campaign or at the end of the quarter or whenever you're looking back on what you've done, you can ask yourself, did it work? And actually have an answer. Now, the nice thing for all of us is that when it comes to online marketing or online businesses, there is a free tool out there that's going to allow us to track all of these things and to make better decisions for doing so. Now, this is where Google Analytics 4 comes into play. Google Analytics 4 was previously Universal Analytics, which was previously Google Analytics, which was previously Urchin. So notice there's been a lot of like metamorphosis happening there. So I want to remind you before we jump into this that Google Analytics 4 is simply an iteration of Universal Analytics. It still has much of the same information that we're used to seeing. It's just in a little bit different of a place and it looks a little bit different. Now, Google Analytics 4 was a change that needed to be made. It had to be made. Google had to make the change or else people wouldn't be able to use Google Analytics anymore. This has to do with things like privacy, and data security, collection, all of the legislation that's come out around that. Also needed to account for cookieless browsing. You know, we saw the release of iOS 14.5 last year, and how that has affected marketing data. Google Analytics 4, you know, makes up for that by giving us a lot more access to their machine learning and artificial intelligence. And also has to make, it made some adjustments for truly understanding the full user experience. You know, when Universal Analytics came out, people still had m.breeeanderson.com. We still had mobile only websites, but now we know that Google does mobile first indexing, really mobile only indexing, and you know, our mobile sites are no longer separate from our desktop sites. People are accessing the internet in multiple ways, multiple times, every single day. And Google Analytics 4, again, really took that into mind when they created this platform. Now, this is the big, you have to do this now announcement of this presentation. There is no retrospective data when you start Google Analytics 4. So if you want to wait until next year, July of 2023, when they say, all right, now you have to use Google Analytics 4, just know that you're going to log in and see a bunch of goose eggs. It's all going to be zeros. Google Analytics 4 uses a completely different data structure than Universal Analytics, which means the two don't go together. They don't play well together. So you start from zero in Google Analytics 4. So if you want year-over-year data, which all of you do, because every business to some degree is seasonal, you need to start Google Analytics 4 today so that you have data to look back at. All right. The setup isn't too terribly complicated. You have your website and you have Google Analytics. They need to talk to one another. They do this through a tag. The tag listens for specific information. And once it hears that information, it throws it over to Google Analytics in a way that it can understand. Now, that tag is listening for specific events, for specific triggers, they're called. They listen for specific triggers to be tripped, and then they send that information over, right? So the trigger, when you set up Google Analytics 4 for the very first time, the trigger that you're going to be using is all page views. Anytime somebody comes to my website, I want to collect it and I want to send it to Google Analytics 4, right? So you have your trigger, the tag listening for the trigger. Once the trigger is done, the tag collects the information, sends it to Google Analytics 4. Now these triggers can get more complicated, right? There are certain things on our websites that we want to collect, specific events. So those form fills, right? You might have a separate tag that has a trigger of when people click on the submit button on my contact page, I want to have that information collected by the tag and sent over to Google Analytics 4, right? So you can start stacking some of those triggers for the tag to listen to and send over to Google Analytics 4. Now in GA4, there are multiple events. Cool thing about Google Analytics 4 though, you can collect up to 500 events. Amazing. That's far more than we used to be able to collect in Universal Analytics. And it's actually a lot easier to collect events in Google Analytics 4, believe it or not. Some people don't believe that, but it actually is. Previously with Universal Analytics, anytime you wanted to have an event, you had to specify like a category, action, label, and sometimes value if you wanted that. In Google Analytics 4, there are 3 types of events. We have automatic events that happen no matter what. So think of these as like your birthday. Your birthday is going to happen no matter what. You are going to get a year older no matter what, whether you want to or not. Your birthday comes around, you are a year older, right? So some of the events that are going to happen no matter what, once you put the tag on your site, the GA4 tag on your site, you're going to collect first visits, session starts, and user engagement. Side note, Google has determined what user engagement is for us as users. Engagement is anytime somebody spends 10 seconds or more on your website, visits 2 or more pages, or completes a conversion event. Now, because conversion events and page views aren't collected by default in Google Analytics 4, it's really looking for that 10-second site session by default, right? Automatically. Now, the good news is there's also enhanced measurement with Google Analytics 4. When you create your Google Analytics 4 property, enhanced measurement is turned on by default. I highly suggest keeping it on. And because these are events that are going to be collected for you, should you leave them on. So they're built out for you, and you get to choose, kind of like Christmas. There's, in the US, you have Christmas blocked off for most businesses, whether you decide to celebrate Christmas or not, whether you want to celebrate Christmas or not, or you do or not, that is going to be built out for you, kind of like these enhanced measurements. So this is what it looks like when you create your data stream in Google Analytics 4. You'll see that enhanced measurement is turned on by default. These events are page views, scrolls, outbound clicks, site search, video engagement, and file downloads. Using most of these things, you can track, other than like e-commerce, I would say like 90% of the things that you want to track on your website, right? And after your enhanced events, you also have recommended events. So these are the events that Google says every website should have if they have it, if they offer it. They need to be tracking these events. It's kind of like tax day. You don't have to do it, but you probably want to do it, or else the government's going to come after you. The IRS terrifies me. So anywho, you have the events that you probably should track. Google has a list of all of these events for all properties. They say if any of these things apply to your website, you need to be tracking them. Things like login, purchase, select content, sign up, tutorials, all that kind of stuff. They also lay out recommended events for e-commerce as well as mobile apps like games. You can find all of that in Google's documentation. I can share a link later on if anybody has questions about that. And then there is a fourth type of event, but these are completely separate because they're custom events. You can collect them however you want. You can collect whatever kind of information you would like. The easiest way to do it is using something like Google Tag Manager. Now, there are a lot of custom events that you can collect by creating events directly in Google Analytics 4. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or if you're really fancy, you have webhooks set up that will send information to Google Analytics 4, but that's really advanced and very few people honestly do that. But it is an option. So these custom events, like I said, you can create them right in Google Analytics 4. So these are the enhanced measurements or the enhanced events that are collected by Google by default, right? Should you keep them turned on. So you see that on the left-hand side, we have all of these event names, right? These are the different events that are being collected. But on the right-hand side, we have all of these parameters that are also being collected. So the events are the things that we're going to get metrics for, right? We're going to get actual numbers. The parameters are ways to splice and dice those numbers. So I like to say you have your quantitative data and you have your qualitative data. Looking at your parameters here, you can use these parameters to create custom events in Google Analytics 4. It looks like this. So you would go to events, well, you would go configure events, and then you would go into new events. You create an event, and you can use those parameters to create new events just by setting up some conditions. So this is an example. If I want to, in this example, maybe we have like a purchase underscore complete event, right? That we want to track. And we know that this event is completed when somebody views, right? So the event name is page view, and they view a page that has the page title that contains thank you. So if they view a page that contains the word thank you, then we are now triggering this purchase complete event. And all of that is done right in Google Analytics 4. So someone just dropped something in my house. So I'm going to actually, let's see, let me share a different screen here so we can look at this. So can everybody see GA4? Okay, perfect. So this is what GA4 looks like. You can see that you have a new menu on the left-hand side. We'll go over that here momentarily. But if we wanted to create new events, well, let's back it up a little bit. If you go to admin here, you'll see that there are no views in Google Analytics 4. I know a lot of us were really used to Google to views. The reason we don't have that is because now we have data streams, and you can put your you can put app data streams, you can put website data streams, all sorts of stuff in here. And then they suggest that you use like custom audiences or whatever instead of views in GA4, but alas. So if you come into your data stream though, so once you create a GA4 property, you're gonna need to come in and create a data stream. So for this is just a demo account. So this is their website here. The measurement ID is what you'll need to use if you use Tag Manager to set up GA4, which I suggest that is what you do. When you do that configuration tag, all you're going to need is this number right here. You'll make sure that enhanced measurement is on. And then you see you have these options for creating events. So this is one way to do it. You would just create a custom event. And then you can see these are some of the events that have been created. So custom event name, registration underscore complete. And they just laid out these conditions. They have to view a page that equals this. So if they view this page, which I don't know why they're using this page, but alas, if they view this page, it triggers the event registration complete, right? So you can come in and create your events there. Or you can do it by going through configure events, create an event. And then there's usually a button here that says like create new event. And then they all show up right here. The cool thing about events 2 and GA4 is that usually there's a toggle right here. And if you press the toggle and it turns blue, that means that you have marked it as a conversion. So if I come over to, let's see, I don't know if this account has anything in it. No, what about, here we go. So you see how this says mark as conversion. So all of these are events that are being collected. If I want to mark generate lead as a conversion, I just click this. And now that's going to move over to conversions, and I'm going to be able to see it as a conversion in all of my reports in GA4. So again, here we could create an event based off of this, create, you could say event name equals, we'll just do page view. And then again, here are all the parameters you can use, and all of these are collected by default. You get even more if you use Tag Manager and have all your variables turned on. So do suggest doing that. Before I go any further, I forgot to say this at the beginning. If you have any questions at any point at all, throw them in the chat. I'm more than happy to address them as I go. So if anything I just showed you or talked about as far as setup goes, you have questions about, go ahead and throw those in the chat. Yes, Andy.
There we go. So just before you were talking about there's no longer views. So
Yeah.
I used to in Google Analytics Universal, just for people that are listening, I used to set up different views, master, unfiltered, and test.
Mm-hmm.
So can you do that? What's the equivalent? Is there do you need to do an equivalent in GA4?
So in GA4, so the reason we did that was because you would have like a testing, right, that you used,
yeah.
but yeah, and then you had filters for like bot traffic, internal traffic, you know, things of that nature. If you come into data settings and go into data filters, this has internal, everything is on testing. So if you say, like, if you mark something as internal traffic, it's testing whether or not something says internal traffic or has been marked as internal traffic before it actually excludes it. Because here's the thing, if you put on a data filter for internal traffic, right, like let's say my IP address, if I say this is internal traffic and I have this as active, no matter what, if I come to the website, it's not collecting my data because it's been marked as internal. So if at any point I left the company or that I was working with and they do want to start tracking my data, they're starting from zero. Whereas if it's on testing, that data is still collected and stored. It's just you don't access it, right? So they tell everybody to keep this on testing all the time, no matter what. But essentially, yeah, you would just create data filters here and use them that way. Or, you know, you can always go into configure and then audiences and create specific audiences that you might want to filter out at certain times. That's probably the best way to do it. But yeah, there's no equivalent to like a testing view. You might just have to create two different properties. Yeah.
So I want to make sure I understand. So I know in Universal, when you would set up the views, it would automatically exclude. So if you set up a filter that wasn't right, you kind of like were out of luck when you wanted to go back and get that. So what you're saying on this is you set these up, it still collects it. It's just the I can't remember the word term, but it still collects. Is that what you're saying in GA4?
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you were to come in and go to, so it's under admin, data settings, data filters. If you go into any of these filters and you try and change it over to active, you'll get a warning message. Whereas this, you'll see that it is available in reporting still. Like you can still access it if you want to. Yeah. So
in theory, then there's no way of deleting or filtering out data because it's always being collected.
I mean, if you change it to active,
yes. Okay.
then yeah, it's not. Also, since we're here already, we talked about how GA4, like, it had to come out because of privacy reasons and all of that stuff, right? You get all of these different options when it comes to data collection. So if you want to turn on granular location and device collection, and you can turn this off for specific countries, they had to do this because of like GDPR. In some places, you're not able to collect that information. Same thing with ad personalization and user data collection. So you address all of that in this section. So under data settings and then data collection. Then we also have options for data retention. Now, by default, it's only retaining this data for 2 months. You're going to want to come in and change that to 14 months. And this is user specific data tied to events. So a lot of people see this and they go, oh, we only get 14 months of data. No, that's not how this works. This is just 14 months of data that connects a user to an event. Okay. And if you're to specifically, so like if you're going to splice and dice data, after 14 months, you still get all the standard reports and everything. It's just you're not going to be able to splice and dice data the same way, and it's not going to tie specific users to specific events. So yeah, don't freak out, but do make sure that you change it to 14 because it's
I was
still
just
not
about to say,
gonna
so
happen.
this tip that you're saying now, this is one of the things when you first install GA4 for a client or somebody, this is one of the areas that you go bop bop and change it to 14 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's see, and here they also have that the data deletion again. They need to have access for data deletion, just because of like GDPR reasons and all that. Also, go in here and connect any of your products that you have. So if you have Google Ads, Search Console, Merchant Center, any of those things, make sure you go ahead and connect all of those in here because it's going to make analytics more powerful for your business. Okay, how are we feeling so far? Events. You want to make sure that you're collecting events because in Google Analytics 4, it has built-in anomaly detection and predictive analytics, but those only work if you're collecting events for so long and you collect all of, like, you have to hit a certain threshold of events. So like, I think it's like 100 events or something, and then it starts giving you predictive analytics. So you want to start collecting those events as soon as possible. Also because, you know, a year from now, you're going to wish that you had collected those events.
Just one thing, sorry, just one thing that springs to mind as well. What about, have you found or have they worked on spam bot? You know, we're not on a monthly basis, but we get attacked by spam bots, which shows in the traffic and we have to filter all that out. So have they made, is there a better job of that in this?
Yeah, so you can create, you can create filters for that. I haven't done it personally yet though, so I can't, like, from personal experience tell you the best way to do that off the top of my head. Okay, let me change this back over. Well, actually, before I do that, no. Okay, so in GA4, you'll notice that we have this, I call it like primary menu. This is a new menu that we have in Google Analytics 4. So we have our home page, and this is actually all customized to you. So these are the metrics that Google thinks are most important for your website, right? Then you have some real-time stuff. This is automatically generated based on the things that you are viewing the most. Let me change this back over to the demo account so we have some data in here. So this is the information they think is most important to you. You've got some real-time data. These are all of the views that you've looked at recently. So for me, I go to the same reports almost every time I jump into analytics. So this is super nice. I can just come here and jump straight to those reports, or even certain areas of analytics. So you can see that, you know, the data streams, I've been in there multiple times today, so I can go straight to data streams. Then you have your insights. So again, this is anomaly detection built right into Google Analytics 4. So this is saying users from organic Google dropped. They had expected, so this is statistically significant. So you can see the lines for variation, the trend line, and it says, hey, we expected you to be at 6,200. You're actually only at 2,900. Something might be wrong. So this is super, super helpful. You see this a lot more in Google Analytics 4 than you did in Universal Analytics. And all of these insights, you know, are right here on the homepage. And you can create your own. So if you go like to view all insights and manage, you can create your own things that you want it to look for and all that stuff. So what this does, especially as a business owner, you know, I say that analytics comes down to two things: identifying trends and identifying outliers. As a business owner, using these insights and customizing them and having them look for things for you so that you don't have to do it, this can save you time. You just go in and say, hey, I am working with an influencer. I need to know if anything wild happens with our traffic through working with this influencer, right? Like if you're contracted and you're supposed to hit these numbers, if we don't hit these numbers, I need to be alerted about that, right?
You can do you can do email alerts on things like that.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, I mean, super, super helpful because it's not, I mean, these are the outliers, right? But then it also shows you the trends. So this is what drove the most conversions. This is what, you know, we're noticing that this is a trend for you. This is consistently going up or whatever that might be. Super, super helpful. So that's all just in your homepage. Then if you come down to the second thing, which is reports, this is what we're kind of used to seeing. This is what Universal Analytics kind of showed you in our main menu. So these are all the reports. We're going to talk about these in a second, so I'm not going to go too in depth, but these are where all of your numbers live for the most part. You have Explore, which is kind of like a mix between custom dashboards in Universal Analytics and Data Studio. So you can do I mean, it works the same way as Data Studio. It's not near as sophisticated as far as like how pretty you can make it or what you can add. But you can see they have some pre-built explorations in here. It's what they call them. I will say, if you're looking things for like, you can see it here, the funnel and path exploration, they don't have like behavior flow or like funnel views in the reports anymore. You have to come to explorations and create them yourself. So that's kind of a bummer, but this is where it lives. Then you have this section, which is called advertising. Don't know why they call it advertising. It should really just be called attribution, because this is where you're going to find all of your attribution information. So you'll be able to do model comparisons to see, you know, first click versus last click, which this can be really helpful because you might see something like, so if we look at let's do last click. So last click is what most ads are going to use. So if you run Facebook ads or even Google ads, that's what most of them are using. So let's say you are trying to figure out how much revenue you got from paid search, right? Well, this says Google by default is using, now we get access to their data-driven model. So by default, that's what this is using. It says, but using this attribution model, we were able to get $816 in revenue, which if we spent a lot of money, $800 isn't that much. But they said if you look at last click, then we have $922 attributed to Google or whatever that paid search platform was. So you can compare those models here. You can also see how many conversions, like the difference on that side. More importantly, I think this is far more helpful than that, is to look at the conversion paths. So you can look at all of the different channels people visited before converting. You can see how many conversions it led to, how much revenue, days to conversion, touch points to conversion, etc. And you can, you know, you could always add a filter in here for any, like maybe you just want to see, you know, people that session source medium that includes organic. So we're going to include that. Okay. All values containing organic, apply. And now this is going to show us all of the conversion paths that include organic. So we see organic search twice, you know, whatever. Again, if you're investing in a marketing strategy and you want to see how well it's performing for you, this is the best place to do it. All right. Yes.
The question is, this also, is that I'm looking at like where you had organic search and all that, is that where you would find your UTM when you're adding UTM codes? Is this where you would find that?
So you can find those across any report, really. It's just by default, Google gives us channels. You would just change it to source or medium or source medium. I prefer source medium. I'm going to let my cat out of my room real quick, but still talk.
Okay.
I prefer to use source medium over channels for that reason, is that I use a lot of UTM codes. So on any of your reports, you can change it to source medium. It just looks like this one. you can't for some reason.
Talking about the UTM codes, did I read somewhere that there's something with UTM codes that we're currently using and we can't use them now, or they're not recorded in GA4? Is that, do you know where I'm going with this?
I've not run into any issues with UTM
Well, if you
codes
haven't,
in
Bree,
GA4.
then I must have misread the.
No, I mean, there are a lot of weird things that happen in GA4, so I couldn't tell you. I do know it's harder to find them in here, but like, so you can see, well, this is a bad example because that's here. Let's see. So I would just change this. You have to customize all of these reports.
So I was just about to say, you just said a classic there with GA. That's the problem with GA4. You went, and it's really hard to find. And you're like,
yeah,
that's the problem at the moment.
Yeah. And I think too, if you're used to Universal, it probably at one point was hard to find there, but now that you've done it so much, now you got to find the new place to find it.
Yeah. So what you're seeing right here, this is how you customize reports. So you can customize just about anything in GA4. Now, can you get it to do exactly what you want? I don't know, just depends on what you're trying to get it to do. But like, for instance, you don't have source medium as an option by default. So I've come into almost all of my reports and added, so if you click on dimensions here, you can add whatever dimensions you want. So I added the dimension of source medium. And once I click apply and save, I'm just gonna save changes to current report, save. Now, anytime I come to this report, that's what it's going to look like. So now I have access to source medium. Thank you very much. And okay, it broke. Well, yep. That doesn't make it. Oh, probably because this is session. I selected the wrong dimension. So in GA4, they've separated traffic from users. So you have session acquisition, you have traffic acquisition, and then you just have this random acquisition. So you want to make sure, it's because I didn't select session source medium. But anywho, this is how you would find it. So you have your source and your medium. So it would just be like active campaign, email, and you see that here.
We have a question in the chat from Harmony. How do I track? How would Harmony track performance for individual landing pages and groups of landing pages?
Individual landing pages is a lot easier because you can just come to engagement, pages, and screens. And then you would just change this to, you have to add in landing pages as a dimension. They rolled it out and didn't tell anyone. Come in here.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. Bree's doing this quite quick. Remember, folks, we're recording this and it'll be on YouTube so we can rewatch. And
yeah.
And I've got the link, our YouTube link. I'll post it again.
So, sorry, Bree.
No, you're fine. So yeah, you have to come into the dimensions of the pages and screens report and add landing page as a dimension. You can make it the default too. So if you're like, I really only care about landing pages, you could hit these three dots right here, set as default, apply. And now you can see that we have our landing pages and we can see, views, users, all that stuff by landing page here.
Sorry, okay, so for me personally, sorry, I know I just said we're recording it. Can you just repeat that again? Just go through exactly from...
Yeah, so when you're in your reports view, here,
yes,
just go to pages and screens and then hit the pencil in the top right hand corner and go to dimensions, add dimension, and you're going to find landing page, which I've already added mine, and add landing page as a dimension. Now, what you could do is you could set this as the default hit apply. And when you save it, you can save it as a new report. So instead of it being pages and screens, maybe we just call it landing page. Hit save. And what it's going to do is it's going to add it to our menu. So give it a second here. The good and the bad thing about GA4 is that it's obvious that developers had a heyday with it. So it's good because you can do all of these really cool things, but it's bad because you have to do all of these really cool things. And most people don't have the time to figure them out. Okay, I don't know why this is taking so long. So now you have your landing page report here that you'll be able to find in the menu when GA4 is loading correctly.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, so since we're talking about reports, let me switch back to this really quickly. Okay, so you go into your report section of GA4. Reports, I mean, Google Analytics is simply just a conglomeration of all these different reports that you get, which is nice because they look pretty. They look like this. They allow you to look at all this different information. Great. But in GA4, they're sorted into what are called topics. So each of these things, right, represent a topic. So in GA4, we have different topics, like acquisition, for instance, is a topic. And all of the reports about an acquisition are going to fall under that topic. Each topic has an overview report, which kind of gives you the high level information that you need to know. And it has detailed reports about specific things. So in acquisition, for instance, we have our overview report, and then we have detailed reports about user acquisition and traffic acquisition. So in GA4, you have user acquisition, which is how did Bree get to our website the very first time? And then traffic acquisition is how did Bree get to our website anytime she's accessed our website, right? Because I might go to your website 10 times and it's how did you get to the website all 10 of those times? Cool? We following more or less? Okay. So those are your details.
I think we're all thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same as Universal. It really isn't too terribly different. The only reason I'm giving you this is because you can, once you understand this, you can customize your navigation. So you have all of your different topics, right? So we have acquisition, engagement, monetization, each of them with an overview and detailed reports. These make up the life cycle that Google has identified in Google Analytics 4. So acquisition, engagement, monetization, and retention. Now, life cycle is what they're called a collection in GA4. So you have your collection with a bunch of different topics, with a bunch of different reports, right? So there are two collections in your menu by default. You have your life cycle, and then you have your demographic collection. And it looks like this. So your collection of life cycle with your different topics and users with different topics. All of these things can be, like I said, customized to allow you to create a GA4 experience that makes sense for you. So let's see, hold on. How do I change this? There we go. Okay. So if you come to your library, you'll see that you have all of your option for collections and your option for reports here. You can create new collections, you can create new reports. If you come into any of these, so this is the lifecycle collection, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to have monetization in here because you don't have e-commerce. You can just remove that, hit save changes to current collection. Now, when I go back, monetization isn't in the life cycle, so it's not bulking up my navigation, right? Now, when you connect things like Search Console, it's going to come in as a new collection, but not be published by default. Why? I don't know. But you would just hit your three dots and then select publish. But yeah, you can make this look however you want. I've had some instances where I think in one of these dummy accounts, I created a universal analytics. No, it wasn't this one. One of my accounts, I created like the universal analytics navigation and just put it in here. Yeah, I can't find it now, of course. But you can change like the names of these things, and whatever makes sense to you or whatever makes sense to your clients, you can make those adjustments here.
You're saving different reports and editing things, and if you've got a client with exactly the same requirements, it's like all my clients are attorneys, so reporting is going to be pretty much the same. I can see you from your face, it's bad news, I think. Can I save that and export it and say, hey, can I share this report with that account? Good.
No, not yet. Yeah. Not yet. And the reason I say not yet is because I do have faith that Google is going to allow the functionality to share reports, because if we look at Explore, they do have this gallery, this Explore template gallery, right? And I have a feeling that we're going to start seeing like community templates and things like that come through. So I would hope that eventually, that would come through in our reports as well, especially because there are so many options for reporting. But yeah, as of right now, you kind of have to just do it all by hand, unfortunately.
Okay. Just while you're still in GA4 there, the dummy account. Sorry, Harmony came back and said, thanks for your answer, obviously, on the tracking the landing pages. But she said, are content groups still a thing?
Yes, so they are. You just have to set them up differently. But in order to track those, it would be the same thing. So you would go in and you go to where we added landing page. You would just add content group and then make that report. For some reason, my chat is hidden somewhere and I can't seem to find it. I have no idea where it went. Oh, here it goes. Found it. Yes, Amanda, I'm the same way. I have fun customizing all this. I understand it's a pain in the ass. I do totally understand that 100%. But I find it exciting that we do have so many options for customizing, because I think it can be really helpful for, some of our clients that just want to see very specific things. Instead of getting lost in all of this, like, let's just give them the 3 reports they care about and we'll go find everything else for ourselves. So yeah. Okay, so the last thing that I kind of want to cover really quickly is the common metrics that we're going to see in GA4. They are very similar to what we saw in Universal Analytics. So you kind of have your user metrics. Again, we talked about engaged sessions have been defined for us as 2 or more page views, 10 seconds or more, or a conversion event being completed. But from user, now we have engagement metrics, which are different from behavior metrics, which is what we saw in Universal Analytics. These engagement metrics include engagement rate, engaged sessions per user, average engagement time. Very, very similar to what we saw in UA. No, there isn't bounce rate in GA4 now, but we are able to see bounce rate through the API. So that kind of hints to us that it might be coming in GA4, but you do have an engagement rate. So I would say you're probably fine just looking at your engagement rate to make the same decisions. And then we have conversion metrics. Now, what's really cool about, did they go ahead and they may have added it already? I don't know. I've been busy with MozCon this year. Harmony says that they added bounce rate this week. So there you go.
Yeah, they did, but it's different. It's a different bounce rate to universal bounce rate.
Yeah, I believe that. The cool thing about conversion and event data in GA4 is that you see how it says like all events under event count and all events under conversions. You can actually toggle and select specific events and it refreshes all of your data for those events, which to me is really cool, because again, if you can record 500 events on a in an account, there may be times where you just want to see how one event performed, and you're able to see it right here. Same thing with conversions. So that's cool. And then real quick, just to wrap up, which we can go over more in platform things if you guys have questions, but just to wrap up, I like to remind people this, that when it comes to your data, it doesn't have to, like, using your data doesn't have to be overly difficult. We make it overly difficult, but it really doesn't need to be overly difficult. Basically, anytime you look at your data and you're evaluating a tactic or a strategy, it can come down to one of three things. You're putting it in one of three buckets. It's either something you're going to stop, you're going to start, or you're going to scale. And coming to that conclusion is actually pretty easy, because all you do is you ask yourself, did it make me money? Did it do what I needed it to do? And if the answer was no, then you can't keep doing it, because it's not a good business decision. You have to stop. You have to stop doing it the exact way you're doing now. So I won't say you just can't ever blog again because your blog's not making money, but the way that we're blogging right now, if it's not making us money, we can't keep doing it that way. So if we're just creating a blog, sending it into the ether and walking away, and it's not making us money, like, kind of duh. But maybe we need to send our blog into the ether and then send out a newsletter to send people to the blog, or send out some tweets or whatever that might be, right? So you just can't keep doing it the exact same way you've been doing it. But if it is making you money and it is working for you, or bringing you business or whatever, then you ask yourself, did I mean to do that? Because sometimes we have happy accidents. Love happy accidents for us. But if we didn't actually have a strategy for us, then it's time for us to create a strategy, right? So go in and do it with intention. That's the difference of it just happening because we didn't have a strategy for it, and doing it with intention. So having a strategy behind it. So a lot of times for me, this with my clients, it ends up being like, oh, we're getting a ton of really qualified traffic from this one specific blog, and we had no idea this blog existed. How can we support them? How can we find more people like this blog? You know, and really be intentional about working with that blog, right? So that's something that you would start. If it is making you money and you did have a strategy, figure out how you can do more of it. How are you going to scale this strategy? Can you scale this strategy? But that's really the bucket that it would fall into. Like I said, using your data doesn't have to be totally difficult, doesn't have to be over the top. Just go through this flow chart and ask yourself, is it making me money? Did I mean to do that? Or did it just happen? Yeah, so that's all I have for GA4. If you have any specific questions, I would love to answer them.
I do, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And it's the question we asked before we went live on the video.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to warn everybody that's listening and watching is, okay, so what is going to happen on 1st of July 2023 when they switch off Universal?
Right. So as of right now, they're saying July 2023, we're turning off Universal Analytics. You're not going to see it. You're going to get no data, blah. What I suppose will happen is they are actually going to stop collecting that data. I don't doubt that. They will stop collecting Universal Analytics data. What I suspect, though, is that we'll be able to access that data for at least a little bit afterwards. Now, I don't know. I have no contact with Google. I could just be making it up. But I can't imagine that they're actually just going to take all of our data away in one foul swoop. I do suspect, though, that there will come a time that we do lose that data. So again, just really, really encourage everyone to go out there and get their analytics set up. I will say, if you're at a company that really needs their data from Universal for whatever reason, and you have the money and bandwidth and know-how, that you can, export all of your data from Universal Analytics and put it into BigQuery. It is kind of labor intensive. It is kind of expensive, but it is possible. So yeah.
And my other ones were
Yeah,
answered in your talk today.
Well, that's good. Yeah, so Andy plugged, I do have a course on GA4. He dropped the link in the chat there. It's, you know, I would love to see all of you there if you want to come hang out. I do also offer one-on-one training if that's more your speed. And if you're leaving this talk feeling like an absolute analytics master, I do sell analytics master shirts. So I do highly recommend them because they get a lot of compliments. People like them a lot.
They're
So
good quality. They're very, very good quality.
I appreciate it. Yeah. But yeah, this has been fun.
You know, so thank you ever so much, Bree. That's been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Again, I know you're very accessible on Twitter, and we've shared that as well. So just thank you for your time today. Awesome. Have a great summer. Yeah,
everybody have a great day. I'm going to go tune into MozCon now and hopefully learn some cool new stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.